Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner, Patrick Mooney. We are your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, big news in Chicago. The Pope.
yes.
Malort is going to be a religious experience now, not that it wasn't before. There was some controversy whether the Pope is a Cubs fan or a Sox fan, but he's a Sox fan, so we can't spend too much time on the Pope. He's a Sox fan, so unfortunately, the Cubs went ahead and had they assumed he was a Cubs fan. There was an erroneous report out there.
Erroneous.
So. Not a Cubs fan, but I have a good vibes about the Bears. I'm not a religious person, Patrick, but I mean the Pope is a Bears fan, so I mean I think the Bears are gonna make some noise this year. I'm excited. Even Caleb Williams was tweeting about the Pope.
The internet still undefeated. Like I loved all those memes. Like was getting a bunch of them from friends and family. Like. I don't know. It's so rare to have like a singular kind of moment that everyone's locked in on, and then to see like the WGN did a great job of tracking down the family. I know the New York Times had a story too, but just like the photo of him at like Aurelio's Pizza last summer,
so good, yeah.
The Saint Rita connection, just all the Bears stuff, just so funny. A much needed like moment of levity. Good luck to the Pope.
yeah, it's so you're right. It's like so rare that we all come together on social media and everybody's talking about the same thing. And like social media can be so polarizing now that like. But this was one of those fun, especially Chicago Twitter. It was really fun yesterday. And like you said, I have friends that. They don't spend nearly as much time on social media as I do. So to get all these memes shared by them was really fun. It was a good time. There will be a good time this weekend in New York. It is Cade Horton time. Cade Horton, Cubs top pitching prospect. The last time the Cubs drafted a pitcher in the top 10 was Mark Prior. I was talking about this with our buddy Paul Sullivan. I can't think of a more hyped pitching prospect for the Cubs since Mark Prior. I mean, this guy entered last season, the 2024 season, as arguably the top pitching prospect in baseball. Unless I'm missing someone, that just hasn't happened since Prior. Nobody was in that debate. This is as exciting as a pitching prospect comes for the Cubs, especially. I mean, obviously Justin Steele came up through their system and contended for a Cy Young, but he was not a hype prospect. I'm not sure if he ever made a top 100 list. I don't believe he did. Cade Horton is a legit pitching prospect. Just highly thought of. Aggressive pick by the Cubs, but right now looking like a pretty smart move, and we'll see. He could be he's making his debut on Saturday at Citi Field. It's a big moment for him and an exciting moment for Cubs fans.
Yeah, I was trying to think, was Carlos Zambrano's debut? I was not there for that one. That would be the only other sort of homegrown pitcher. And obviously no one could have known the full scope of Big Z when he debuted.
I think he was like a solid prospect, but I don't remember him being like super hyped.
I mean, but yeah, you're right. Like I've been kind of going through the mental Rolodex as well, of trying to find certain reference points. We had a lot of great position player debuts that were certainly long anticipated, and guys who did deliver on the hype, whether it's Javi Baez or Chris Bryant. I guess Anthony Rizzo wasn't a pure debut. Obviously he had come up with the Padres, but that was a full Rizzo watch. And I think for our listeners' side, I think it'd be useful to kind of go back to that draft, because I remember you were hearing a lot of stuff around that time, and I think some of the names that were bandied about before that selection were position players, right? And just I think to put into context of how Cade Horton really just popped on the radar late leading into that draft.
Yeah, I believe the name we kept hearing over and over again was Brooks Lee. There was maybe there was that the draft of the shortstop, the Indian shortstop that's now in the Blue Jays system. We were hearing a lot of different. That may be a different draft, but Brooks Lee was the name I remember. Who's now a Twins third base prospect, or maybe he's already come up. It was all position players. I don't remember that draft being highly thought of for pitchers, and that was something I remember getting told. Don't you should also remember that the way there are things we can look at now that a small sample size isn't always a small sample size. If a guy has a plus pitch that he just recently developed, that's a real thing. And what that was a big hint that I kind of overlooked pre-draft because I hadn't fully put it all together. Cade Horton just wasn't on my radar, but he was clearly on the Cubs' radar, and I think they surprised a lot of people. And I think there were actually some people that weren't thrilled with that, right? Like I feel like people were a little disappointed, I guess, by the decision to draft Cade Horton.
Yeah, I guess if you just look at the Cubs' history recently, and this is kind of over different regimes and different philosophies, it's been hitter first. And I think, when you look at pitching in the draft, they like to say it can come from anywhere. I would get the hesitancy if you see a guy sort of like get hot, not even for like one season. It was like part of one season where he just like, lit it up. But when you step back, you realize, okay, the Cubs had a prior relationship with him kind of, I believe it was that COVID draft or kind of right before COVID happened when he was in high school in Norman, Oklahoma. The Cubs had done the home visit, a lot of background work. I don't know. You got to like a guy who was recruited to play, I think it was sort of a preferred walk-on type role at Oklahoma. I mean, a two-way player on the baseball diamond. And then, if he has this great athleticism and a little bit of feel and a competitive drive, you can kind of see it all come together. And obviously the industry valued him a little differently, or at least lower than a number 7 pick because the Cubs were able to get him below slot. And then interestingly enough, they go get Jackson Ferris, give him $3 million. And that was one of the prospects they packaged in the deal to the Dodgers to get Michael Busch, who's become a really nice everyday piece for this version of the Cubs.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They saved a little money. They what people thought was an overdraft with Horton, and they liked him, and they went and got Horton and a key piece in a big trade. They that they've done that before, right? That was the Kyle Schwarber draft where they drafted that they ended up getting Cease and Steele, right?
Yep.
Some people felt Schwarber was a reach, and obviously not. He's still producing at a very high level, and they went and signed a bunch of overslot pitchers later in the draft. It clearly worked out. Patrick, let's take a quick break before we get to more Cade Horton talk.
It is complicated enough to figure out what type of car you want, but when it comes to pricing and best time to buy and all of that information that you're looking for, Car Gurus is the only destination that you should be thinking about, Kratz. Why?
Because I don't have to question what the price is. It's going to be there. If the price changes and comes down to where I want it to be, bang, I get a notification. Car Gurus is giving it to me straight, and this is how I want to purchase a car. Not fast. I just want to know what's going on.
With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more car listings than any other major online automotive marketplace in the U.S. So you can find the best deal, and it's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. So you can buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com.
Patrick, the reason Horton shot up that year was he had his ERA. If you remember, his ERA was pretty bad, right, at Oklahoma.
Might have been a 5 or 6, 7.
Yeah,
It was pretty
it
high.
wasn't anything. Yeah, it wasn't anything special. And he was coming back from Tommy John surgery. He was just working his way back, and he developed this nasty slider that just suddenly things started to click. The velocity was back on the fastball, and this slider was just flummoxing hitters. And he went on a dominant run to end his Oklahoma career. And that's the pitch that stands out. That's the pitch that still garners the most love, whether it's from scouts, whether it's from these Stuff Plus models. The slider is the plus pitch. Last year was a bad year for Cade Horton, right? What did I call him? Cade Horton. It was not a good season for him, and he struggled early on with his fastball. His fastball velocity was down about 3 ticks, and then he got hurt. It was a pretty significant injury, an injury that at first we were told we weren't really clear what it was, and then it wiped out majority of his season. These types of things happen to pitchers, right? It happens all the time to pitchers. Pitching prospects, there's a joke that there's no such thing as a pitching prospect because they get injured. Look at Grayson Rodriguez. I don't even know what he's doing right now for the Orioles. This happens all the time. The top pitching prospect just falls off the radar. They get whether it's shoulder, elbow, whatever, something happens and they fall off the radar. I'm sure there was that concern with Cade Horton, but they got him right. They got him feeling his delivery again, leaning into his athleticism. He looks like the pitcher he was in 2023. What are we, a month and a half into the AAA season? He's been really impressive, and he's back to being a top pitching prospect.
You did a lot of reporting on this. Like, we had been kind of collecting information, like knowing this was coming. We didn't know exactly when, but Horton was on the horizon and then showed his injury, just sped everything up. And what interests me as we've been going back and forth on our Google Docs and kind of reading some of these transcripts, like, could you explain to our listeners, like, what was sort of the Cade Horton plan in spring training, like the summit, the collaboration across departments to kind of, as you framed it, recognize that this was a year to forget, and that acknowledge there were real questions about whether or not he could get back to what he was and kind of get to the next level.
Yeah, it was kind of presented to me as like a brain trust. There were, the people that everyone's heard of, like Tommy Sahadev was involved. Director of pitching, who Ryan Otero took over for Craig Breslow, right? There's Casey Jacobson, who is now the assistant pitching coach. I believe Casey Jacobson was just a pitching coordinator, right? And I think that's what his role was before. Now
he would have interacted, frequently with Horton and had great visibility. I think even going back to before the draft, if I remember correctly, that Jacobson and Breslow, kind of that pitching wing, I believe they were brought in as they were even like evaluating prospects to get a grounding and, kind of share some ideas about what it could look like if they entered the Cubs system.
Exactly. So he was involved. Tyler Zombro, who's a new pitching or special assistant with a focus on pitching. Matt Hinckley is, I believe, pitching coordinator out in Arizona. Mike Son, who's a really interesting guy, a pitching scientist. I believe it's pitching scientist is his title. So cross collaboration between all these different parts of the org, which is so important. In
Mhm.
they've talked about this for years, right? This was what all the changes that were made 5 6 years ago were with this idea in mind, where an organization isn't they look at a organization as a holistic unit. There's no, it's not just the pro side and player development and amateur strength and conditioning. They all got to work together, and that's what happened here. They all came together. How do we get Cade Horton back to being his best self? They a lot of different talks. They noticed that his arm slot had kind of changed. That happens after injuries. Uh, what do you need to work on? What sort of things? What parts of your body do you need to strengthen? These types of things they discussed, and they came up with a plan, presented it to Horton, who's all in. It was nothing too crazy, right? They weren't telling him become a different pitcher. It was more lean into these things that make you special, and you will find your best self. You will go back to being that pitcher that you were in 2023. And it seems like they've gotten him back there. The one thing I find interesting with all of this is the velocity is back with his fastball, and I think that was a question last year. It was something that certain scouts told me they were concerned about because it didn't have the type of traits that were pure, the type of characteristics a fastball has that allows a pitcher to thrive without velocity still. But I think there's something to what the Cubs have with Cade Horton. They have it with Justin Steele. I think Porter Hodge as well. It's the cut ride fastball. This fastball is still, I think, being fully understood by. I think scouts understand it better than the models, and I think the models see Cade Horton as having an average fastball. I think the Cubs may disagree with that. I think we'll find out. We're going to find out on Saturday, and probably over the course of this summer how effective that fastball is. Maybe it's just all about velocity and locating it properly, and with the nasty slider. He's got a good curveball and a developing change. I'm really curious to see how much he uses those, or is he going to be a two-pitch pitcher for the most part, which he has been early on this season. He wasn't last year. Last year was a struggle, but this year he's been a two-pitch pitcher for the most part. I want to say 90-ish%, maybe a tick below 90%. It's been fastball and slider.
What you've outlined, I think, really resonates for anyone who's been paying attention to how the Cubs were built leading into 2016 and sort of how they fell off and how they tried to get back again. Because you're right, it was this chicken or the egg theory of, are the Cubs drafting the wrong pitchers, or are they just not being developed once they come into the system? And it was sort of this like a little bit of a blame game of, you'd see certain guys maybe go to other places or productive, or, they were understandably frequently mortgaging their farm system to try to win now. And there was this, the way I think it was described to us, we wrote a big story, I don't know, a year or two ago about kind of this new Cubs way, and that pitching instruction and philosophies were kind of on two totally different tracks, even when the Cubs were like the best team in the game, having the number one farm system in the game, and that eventually they started to merge, that it became kind of one sort of, not one philosophy, but like everyone kind of going along the same path. And I think Horton, that is part of Horton's rise here. Now, look, like he's fantastically talented, a top 10 pick. It's not like the Cubs, found this, guy under a rock or something like that. But like, it takes a lot. I mean, Justin Steele would say this. It takes a lot of different elements and time to like bring a guy to the majors and have him succeed. And I think we've talked about this before. It's a nice landing spot for him of just the environment, whether it's Craig Counsell's kind of big picture philosophy and his patience with young talent, some awesome defenders on the field, 2 really good catchers, established pitching coach. And like if Kyle Tucker hits a 3-run homer, in the first inning, or maybe he's batting second. Anyway, if Kyle Tucker hits a 3-run homer in New York, or, Pico Armstrong has the awesome game that we kind of think is going to be in there in New York, like all of a sudden he can sort of exhale. This is not a situation where the Cubs are like desperately need a spark, or, they're kind of dragging. Like this is a first place team that's pretty stable, well constructed, and a lot of kind of adults in the room to where like this is all right in front of Horton right now. Like if he can stay healthy, if he can make the adjustments, if he's as good as they say, like he's going to set himself up pretty nicely.
I understand the argument of wanting to give him an easier landing by pitching against the Marlins or the White Sox, but this isn't. The hype has been there for him before he was drafted. This is a kid who was a 2-sport athlete, quarterback. It's not like pressure hasn't been on him before. This is different. It's New York. It's the big leagues. It is different. I'm not denying that. But he's experienced a lot. College World Series, high school quarterback, probably playing in some stressful games with all eyes on him in the community. This is another level, another challenge for him. I think when you're a top prospect, you've probably gotten used to having all eyes on you and learned how to compartmentalize. It's going to be a different moment for him. I think the moment won't be too big. Whether Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso is too big for him, we'll see. That's too big for a lot of pitchers, not just a rookie making his debut. So it's not a question of can he handle this the bright stage, in my opinion. I just want to see how he does against a pretty good lineup. One of the some of the best talents in baseball right now, especially the way Alonso's swinging it. These are 3 of the best offensive players going right now. So I'm curious to see how he handles that just the getting big league hitters out. That's what I'm focused on. I don't think New York is going to be too big for him, just because I think when you're a top prospect, you've experienced a lot of pressure and you've learned how to get through that mentally. I would like to think that that's the case. And talking to him, he seems like a level-headed kid who I even asked him about, does he care back in spring training? How much do you care about the fact that you kind of lost your prospect? You were the top pitching prospect, and now people are questioning whether you're that. He basically said it's all about results. He doesn't care whether he was a top prospect ever before or not. All he has to do is get results and win games, and he'll find success. He understands that. He's not looking for the spotlight. He's not looking for headlines. He's just trying to go out there and do his job. I think that's that's a good sign for the kid. Hopefully he's able to handle this. And this is a good lineup. This is going to be an immediate test. And then it gets, if he stays in the rotation, I think it'll be a few weeks of easier starts. But this first one is a fun one for everyone.
Yeah, and I think if he's able to settle in and get a chunk of starts while Shota heals, I think that will be a much better barometer, obviously, than like a couple innings in New York. And I'm with you. Like, how does this stuff translate? Because the gap between AAA and the majors might be as big as it's ever been. You're talking about a guy who's fantastically talented, but does not have a ton of innings under his belt. And we've praised the Cubs and pointed out a lot of the good things they've done on the pitching side, but also like from Mark Pryor to Cade Horton, that's a really long time. Like that's not exactly like, you know, a pitching factory along the lines of say what they've done in Cleveland. That ultimately that doesn't really matter for Cade Horton specifically, but I think it's just we have to recalibrate expectations as well. Like Cade Horton does not have a ton of reps, and maybe that doesn't matter. Like there are certain pitchers that just have that it factor and it shows up immediately. But when you listen to Jed Hoyer talk about, you know, competitive pitches, making sure you're in and around the zone all the time, you know, the difference between a 1-2 count and a 2-2 count, like stuff like that. The Cubs have a really good game planning system. You know, the way the game is now, like they can kind of say, like, if you put this pitch at this particular spot, there's, you know, X percentage that this is an out. Can you get it to that point over and over and over again? Like that's really hard to do, but certainly he's as well equipped as any Cubs pitching prospect, I guess, in a generation to like go out and execute that. Will be fun to watch. Will be like a great kind of ongoing story. Like I don't think if he throws 3-4 shutout in New York, it's like, oh my God, he's, you know, the next great pitcher in the game. He's not Paul Skeens. But also, like, if he gets shelled in New York, I'm not going to write him off. Like, it'll be like a good story in the sense that there is much larger implications. Like, if this guy's a dude, if they can keep him healthy and keep him improving to where he's like a factor in September and maybe even October, like that would be huge.
I agree with that. Where keeping him healthy, giving him this experience, this could be huge down the line. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see what happens with him over this. If he sticks around for the full month or whatever that Shota's round, does he force his way? Where do they have to say we're not sending him down? We'll figure out what we're doing, but we're not sending him down. We can't do that. He's too good or he's too impactful for this club. That I'm sure that's what they hope. That's what you want to happen. You want to have these really hard decisions where you have too many good players. What you talked about with zone being in the zone, I was looking at some of his numbers. I believe he's had a big jump in zone percentage from last year. I still think it's hard to maneuver through all the AAA numbers. It's not as easy to check averages and everything. I believe it's still below average for AAA, or at least for what would be major league level. That's okay. You know, he's going to learn that he has to be in the zone. He's going to see Juan Soto spit on stuff and say they were chasing that. He's not going to get Juan Soto to chase. He won't be the first pitcher to learn that lesson from Juan Soto. But you know, beyond Juan Soto, he needs to. If guys chase, that's how Shota succeeds. That's how a lot of these guys succeed. You just got to be in the zone enough to get them to chase. The stuff is there. We'll see if the command is there. And I agree, but you can't overthink this first start. We probably will if it's really good, though, right?
We reserve the right to blow it out of proportion, but you know, the day before we're recording on Friday morning, we'll, you know, temper it a bit. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a while since I remember Mark Pryor debut. I was in college still.
Okay.
I was in college. Yeah, we were all hyped for it. My buddy was so excited. He's like, "We got the guy that they're talking about on Sports Center." And you know, it obviously didn't work out as hoped as far as long-term success, but he was exciting for a few years. If you even get a few years of that level of performance, I say that's a win because it's hard to find that level of talent. We'll be back next week to talk about this. I'm sure we'll have a exciting 3 games. This is fun because Mets Cubs. It's been a little while. Was it really like 2015 since these guys were both good? Maybe 16, something like that. It's been a little while since they're both good. Two big, obviously two of the biggest cities in the country, biggest markets, exciting teams. It's nice to have them both on a winning track right now. I think this will be a really fun series. I'm looking forward to watching all three games, and we'll be back to recap it on Monday. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I are on top of all things Cubs. Thanks for listening, everyone.